Well, welcome and thank you for logging in today to join us for this conversation, a very important conversation on voter engagement. Now, my name is Crystal Howard and I'm the publisher of Community Impact newspaper in the DFW region. But our conversation today is part of a very important partnership with the Collin County Business Alliance and part of the Collin County Votes Initiative, which is all about leading voter engagement efforts focused on education and increasing awareness of who and what is on the ballot for Collin County citizens as they head to the polls. Now, the Collin County Votes Initiative is a partnership between the area chambers, which are also very passionate about informing businesses and citizens to make sure people get out and vote. So it is my honor to be part of this conversation, but more so to be sitting, I don't think you can say sitting alongside, but virtually with Mr. Chris Wallace of the North Texas Commission. Can we call this sitting alongside each other, Chris? Is that fair?
You
okay,
Happy
good. Now, Chris, I hope I can call him a friend, but he's also the CEO of the North Texas Commission. Now, if you're not familiar with the North Texas Commission or NTC, the NTC works to unite the region's most prominent leaders to really tackle the challenges facing our 13-county area, and they work to have a united legislative advocacy voice at the state and federal levels. Now, prior to coming to the commission, Chris was the president and CEO of the Texas Association of Business, but also has history in the chamber world. And Chris, what did I forget?
That's perfect. Thank you very much, Crystal. It's so good to be with you and definitely as a friend. Thank you for the great work you do at Community Impact and the true impact that you all make across our entire region. And special thanks to our friends at the Collin County Business Alliance for hosting this session and for all the good work that they do as well. It's so good to be with you all this morning.
Yes, thank you. Now, Chris, I know that, at Community Impact, we are passionate about informing citizens. And for us, it's important that we never endorse candidates or take a side, but we really try to get the information out there. In the areas we serve, we distribute that voter information to every single mailbox. But still, when we pull those voter numbers sometimes, I have to say, personally, I go, oh, it's just not as high as I would like to see. And I know you're passionate about that as well. So as we get into this conversation this morning, first things first, some things have changed as far as the laws and rules as people head to the polls. Can you kind of give us an overview of what those changes are going into this this next voting cycle?
Yeah, you bet. SB 1, Senate Bill 1, can really be summed up, I think, Crystal, in three main areas. One is the change in the voting hours. Two, there's a change in the process in terms of the mail-in ballot. That's probably the one that has received the most media attention lately. And three is poll watchers. And so let me just kind of briefly dive into each of these three. In terms of changing in voting hours, there was a ban on drive-through voting. We saw drive-through voting primarily heavily in the southern portion of the state in Harris County area. Primarily due to COVID. There was a ban related to drive-through voting. Voting times certainly is a change. Voting can happen basically from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. on Sunday. Bans, there are bans now on 24-hour voting. Again, as we saw back in the height of the pandemic. A new SB 1-2 also lays out that it requires some counties, particularly those with a population of over 55,000, to have 12 hours of voting during the second week of early voting. So those are just some key elements once you read through SB 1 regarding change in terms of voting times. Mail-in ballot, we saw many that were rejected. I think we still have a lot of training to do at the state level, at the county level, to make sure that our voters are aware in terms of when they place mail-in ballots, how that process takes place. It is a state jail felony to distribute unsolicited ballots. We all know that, mail-in ballots. That didn't change. Mail-in ballots do require new voter ID requirements. That is a change. Registered voters who are voting by mail-in must now have a driver's license number or the last 4 digits of the social security number actually on their application to vote by mail. And it does get a little tricky. There are some numbers that must be on the envelope when you seal the envelope. And so we are encouraging everybody to really read the instructions. They're pretty clear, but you really have to read the instructions on the actual mail-in ballot envelope. And then finally, poll watchers. There is a required training for poll watchers. There is a new law that allows for what we call maybe free movement partisan poll watchers. Basically, they can go pretty much anywhere within the polling location without restriction, except in the polling booths themselves, of course. And so that certainly is a change. That was, controversial when this was debated in both chambers, certainly when it was signed into law. But we didn't see too much of that play out, of course, in the primaries. I think we'll see some of that play out, or might be more in question by some, maybe in the general election. But we'll see. But the main thing is that no matter of SB1 or the change in voting laws, as you alluded to, Crystal, we have got to get more people out to vote, and businesses can help us do that with their employees.
Tell me more about that, Chris, what you mean by how businesses can get involved.
Yeah.
Because obviously we have some business owners who live in the area and some who maybe just their employees live in the area. But what would you suggest to business owners?
Definitely. No, we call it E to E, employer to employee voter engagement. Employers are so good about encouraging civic participation in nonprofits, community engagement, hence the CCVA and the great work they do, and what Capital One invests in that is so commendable. And to us, employers must go one step further, and that is to provide every tool possible for employees to have an educated vote. Basically, we encourage everything in terms of registering to vote, where to go vote, when to go vote, give a timeline, etc. Everything but how to vote. And we even have our accountability index of how our House members and state senators voted on key bills related to our region in the last session. We have links to the U.S. Chamber of National Association of Manufacturers and some state ally groups on how incumbents voted on key issues related to specific industries. And so basically it's everything but how to vote, but really encouraging that participation from the very top level of the organization. Poll after poll, and there was a recent survey by BIPAC, the Business and Industry Political Action Committee out of DC. We're very engaged with BIPAC, and their recent survey showed that about 72% of employees surveyed, we found that they trust their employers as far as useful voter information. So there's the media, there's neighborhood associations, there's churches, civic groups, other organizations, but the employer is still the most trusted source of information in terms of how the information should go to that employee to actively engage in the voting process.
Well, and I think anybody watching this right now is already taking the good first step, right? But then there's a next step involved in sharing the information and making sure that people are aware of the resources out there. Well, Chris, tell us a little bit about the North Texas Commission specifically and your voter engagement efforts that you all get behind.
Yeah, so we have tools. We'll certainly be sending those out to our stakeholders several weeks prior to any sort of deadline for registration for voting, encouraging their employees to register to vote if they're not. That is the first step. We kind of started off the conversation saying that we must do a better job. Let me give you an example. In North Texas, we have about 4.5 million registered voters. That's about 26% of all Texas registered voters. Texas has about 17.1 million. And this last primary election that we just went through, 17% of North Texas voters cast a ballot on March 1. 17% of the registered voters, and that simply must change. And why it must change is that most people are not aware, but many candidates are actually elected in the primary election. There are examples all over our 13 county region where the candidate that won their primary party election will be more than likely the new legislator from that particular district. If you look at data in terms of the party across various districts, if you won your Republican primary or you won your Democratic primary based on historical data, number of registered voters, who is voting typically, many of those candidates are decided during the primary. So many people think, well, I don't want to vote in the primary. I want to wait and vote in the general. But you're missing a lot of key decision-making during the primary election. So we really push those primary elections. Obviously the general as well is so important, but tools out to employers to share with their employees, our accountability index of how incumbents voted, and really encouraging employers to ask their employees to do their homework. How does a candidate vote in terms of their record related to that particular industry? So if it's in the airline industry, if it's in the banking, financial services industry, if it's in the technology, petrochemical, et cetera, how do those incumbents or even candidates, their platforms, how do they vote currently if they're incumbent, or how will they more than likely vote based on their platform and information that's out there related to the industry in which that employee resides?
I think so often too, even bringing it down to the very local level, in local elections, we see those races decided by such a slim margin. And when people say, I don't feel like my vote is going to count, it certainly does. And in often cases, it decides the election.
Absolutely. We have one right now in Denton County where the challenger is calling for a recount of the incumbent state representative. It was 88 votes. 88 votes. That's so close. And so every vote literally does count. And we are encouraging people to participate in the primary voting process, and certainly in the general election as well.
Chris, I was talking to an elected official yesterday, and he was expressing frustration because he said, one thing that I try to do is get people out to vote who aren't the ones who always vote, because we know those groups of people will always vote. They're very reliable, but there are people who are engaged and have the information, but don't necessarily turn out. And so what do you think can be done to improve upon that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are not aware that you can vote in one primary one year for one party, and you can vote in another primary or the same primary for the other party the next year. And the general, of course, it's one ballot, so you can vote for an R or a D, right? But in the March, you're given a ballot, and it's you can vote for the Republican or the Democrat. But if you're a lifelong Democrat, you can vote in the Republican primary. And vice versa. So I think it's educating people to really do their homework based on the candidate and the particular race that they want to be engaged. So not so much about a party is the way I see it. And so, look at the key races, look at the candidates in those races, and what impact they could make if they were elected. Or if they're already elected and they're making a negative impact, make your voice heard in that particular election. And I think that's what we sometimes fail to do. we're so concerned about, well, I must vote in one party. And we are encouraging people to really vote for an issue and a candidate and how they will impact that particular issue.
You know, coming off of the 2020 census, there have been political maps redrawn, that sort of thing. And so there may be even some confusion about which candidate am I voting for now, or which seat is mine. So can you kind of speak to that and what that means for voter engagement this year in particular?
Yeah, particularly this year with the redrawn maps. You know, on the voter side, you have to, well, same on the voter and the candidate side. You have to get to know your new constituencies. So if you're a candidate in a particular district, or say an incumbent, and you have additions to your map, you have new constituencies that you have to get to know in a very short time frame, and that's very challenging. And so we have House seats, for instance, that have new constituencies, and they had a very short time frame, those incumbents, to get out and meet those new people and travel within the new boundaries, geographical boundaries of their district. Same with the candidate, and of course, same with the voters. And so, you know, some voters are voting for new people who they may not have been following. And so, you know, you need to certainly do your homework. There's a lot of resources out there, a lot of resources, whether it be from this organization, from the commission, from the League of Women Voters, from the parties themselves, from the news media. There's a plethora of information that people can really do their homework. And, you know, we didn't really hear too much about, in terms of complaints, about people having difficulty, you know, determining who their new senator, or, you know, how the new boundaries were drawn that impacts in terms of how they vote on a regular basis. So.
No, that's helpful, Chris. Thank you. And I think, you know, you mentioned some ways that businesses can help push that voter engagement, but I'm curious, in your role, do you ever see businesses that are doing it really well? Any best practices that you could share from what you've seen?
Yeah, we have I love to tell the story. We have a board member who's the CEO of Acme Brick. And I remember him telling me when I was with Texas Association of Business, and I'm sure he still does it today, is he will take, whether it be our tools or other organization tools, and send that out to every employee. And I believe he does this himself, and really encouraging them on be prideful and be engaged. And this is your American right that you're given as a citizen to vote. So use it and be proud of it, and make your voice heard. So by all means, register by the deadline. And then another email from that top leader of the organization on, hey, don't forget, now that you're registered, you must go vote, and, you know, type in your zip code, and it will tell you where your voting location is, and the process of voting by mail if you're eligible, you know, et cetera. And then, you know, early voting. Okay, early voting is here. Here are the times of early voting. Here are the locations that you can early vote. And then on election day, if you choose to wait until election day and vote on election day. So again, it's basically everything leading up to the election, on encouraging them to participate in the process, and why they must participate, and how it could be impactful, not only to them personally, but to them professionally. And it's basically everything but how to vote. And then some may, like I said, they may share links on scorecards, or accountability of issues in terms of legislator votes, on how those elected officials, incumbents in particular, voted on issues related to specific industries. So it's all fair. But it's coming from the very top of the organization to encourage their team members to get out and vote.
That's so good. And I think, you know, a lot of companies today are talking about how to make sure that we're taking care of employees, not just giving them paid time off, but encouraging them to use it and take care of themselves. The same holds for time to go vote too, wouldn't you say? Indeed.
Indeed. And I hope all employers are doing that. That that shows a great effort that your right to vote is so important. But Crystal, we've still got a lot of work to do. As I mentioned before, only 17% of North Texas voters cast a ballot in the March 1, 2022 primary. And while that may be comparable to the last primary, particularly on primary day, on election day, it's still very low. Statewide, just how that compares. Statewide, about 3 million voters cast ballots of the, as I said, 17.1 million registered voters. So overall, about 900,000 more Republicans than Democrats. And we have to encourage people to get out and vote in both parties.
Yes, I think we can certainly do better on the numbers, and I hope to see that needle start to move. We will continue, at Community Impact, we pull those numbers because we watch them with the hope that it moves in a direction where more citizens are engaged and informed. That's certainly key to our mission. And Chris, before we go this morning, is there anything else you want to add to the conversation as we look to wrap it up? Because I think my piece that I would add is I really do hope that everybody takes the time to share the information, to reach out, whether it's employer to employee, friend to friend, to let them know, like you said, here are the resources, and there are a multitude out there, and here are the key dates, and here are the key times, but you make up your mind on how to vote. Is there anything else you'd want to add before we go, Chris?
No, that's the main thing, is that employers are sharing with their employees the importance of their participation in this process, and how that participation is so impactful to the industry in which they are employed, in which they serve. And there are examples all across the entire region that we can give them of employers who are doing this. We can certainly provide them all the tools that they need, and all the tools that they feel comfortable or not comfortable using in terms of which level in terms of the process that you just described. So, Crystal, bad politicians are elected by good people who do not vote. And I say that all the time when I'm not speaking, because we have to further engage people in this process. It's their American right to do so, but we must act on it. We must engage heavily in the process.
Well, Chris, thank you so much. And thank you to the Collin County Business Alliance for putting this on. And the Collin County Votes Initiative is very important. And we have partnered with them, Community Impact Newspaper, this year to work on several videos. Again, not to tell you which candidate to vote for, but to help you get to know the candidate. And those videos are posted. You'll see the resources on your screen as we wrap this up, so that you can get out there and take a minute to watch those videos, get to know the candidates. We do the same at communityImpact.com. Again, because it is just so important to get to know who is on your ballot, and then take that next step to get out there and vote. So thank you to Chris Wallace and the North Texas Commission. Thank you to the Collin County Business Alliance and all the chamber partnerships that make this Collin County Votes Initiative possible. And thank you for watching.